Welcome back, everyone, to season 2 of Baat Karoge to Baat Banegi. I'm Siddhartha, your host for today's episode. I'm a PhD student in political science at the University of California, San Diego. This podcast, produced by Alliance India, aims to raise awareness and foster dialogue on critical issues such as public health and gender-based violence, gender identity, sexual preference, and mental health. In honor of Pride Month, by the way, happy Pride Month to everyone here, we've dedicated this episode to discussing the legal rights and protections available to the LGBTQIA+ community in India. We'll delve into various facets, including the historical trajectory, current legal landscape, marriage and family laws, anti-discrimination measures, and much more. Joining us to explore this significant topic today is our esteemed guest, Ms. Tripti Tandon. Her pronouns are she, her. Tripti is a practicing lawyer based in New Delhi. She has a wealth of experience in HIV/AIDS prevention, drug policies, human rights, and the death penalty. Tripti is also associated with the Lawyers Collective. Notably, she was also instrumental in the legal battle against Section 377 and represented the NAS Foundation there. Tripti, thank you so much for joining our conversation today. I'm very excited to chat about all these issues. Your expertise is going to be very valuable to all of us. With that, we're going to begin this conversation. So, Tripti, let's start briefly with how the LGBTQ legal landscape has evolved in the past 3 or so decades, sort of from the 80s onward, 90s. And if you could just sort of walk us through some major changes that have come about in those decades up till now, we'd love to start from there.
Thanks, Siddharth. I think the 80s and the 90s were really a crucial period where many people, both young and, older individuals were just kind of, they were coming to terms with their sexuality because there was literature available, there were movies, not freely available, but there was at least some semblance of material being available which lent individuals to think through how they felt, but there was obviously no avenue for them to really discuss or even speak about this. It was like this unspeakable subject. And as people started to galvanize, get together in meetings and safe spaces, the one question that always came up was, what is our status in this country? What is our status as citizens, as people? And the answer was, well, you are criminalized under Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code of colonial Iran law, which criminalized same-sex relations. So that rendered poor individuals, a term used was unapprehended felons, and really rendered them invisible, that even if they were to try and speak about their existence, they would be slapped with this particular provision. And then this provision was challenged in court before the Delhi High Court, and 2nd July 2009, when the decision in the NAS Foundation case was delivered by the Delhi High Court, I think for the first time, where people felt what freedom means, what freedom feels like. And it was a much celebrated decision which said that if a person's sexual orientation is protected as part of the fundamental right to privacy, that any kind of criminalization is tantamount to discriminating someone on the basis of sexual orientation. And also that a person's dignity, autonomy, health are all impaired by this provision. And as this provision was kind of sinking in, there was another case which I must mention because it was really, a milestone of some sorts, I think. This is in early 2010, where Professor Ramchandra Siras, he was teaching at the Aligarh Muslim University, and one fine evening, some strangers barged into his house. They had video cameras, and they tried to shoot him and his partner in an intimate act. And there was a full, hue and cry raised, and the university authorities joined in. and he was subsequently suspended from his position at the university and also asked to vacate his official premises, and even water and electricity were cut down. So and the university said that what he had done was unbecoming of a teacher, and he really, literally spoiled the pious reputation of the university. So you can imagine the kind of trauma that Professor Sirius may have gone through, and this time, because we had the NAS decision, we were able to move the Allahabad High Court against the university's actions. And, at the first hearing itself, the Allahabad High Court, the judges were absolutely sympathetic. And they made it very clear that a person's sexual orientation is part of their, private life, their private matter, and it's none of the university's business. So they restored him back, stayed the university's decisions. And, that really, for us, was that NAS had stood firm on the promise of equality that the decision had held out. Unfortunately, this freedom was short-lived. And as we know, in 2013, the Supreme Court overturned the NAS decision and reinstated criminal law back into the lives of individuals. And I just want to, move back to one particular case that we had filed in the Delhi High Court. It was about two women who were in love, and one of them had been married against her will, and she was had been detained in literally her marriage home. And I remember that though we approached the Delhi High Court, we were not sure how this would go, because remember, we were back in the 377 era. And it was, while we had filed this petition, we were just there was palpitation. One of us, how is this going to happen? What are we going to do? But fortunately, we had a very patient hearing from the Delhi High Court, and they, that petitioner who was being detained was free. But there was no comment by the court on the relationship between the two of them. So so it was what good, happy times feel like, but you also know what it is to come back into dark times. So that was about the law on same-sex relations. Very briefly also, I'll speak about transgender persons' rights, because that has had a slightly different trajectory. So they were in the era to the first decade of 2000 up until 2014. There have been some cases filed by transgender persons on different aspects of their identity and rights, but most of these did not succeed in court. So there is one decision of the Gujarat High Court where a member of the Hijra community approached the court saying that this Toli Vadhai, which is a kind of a traditional practice in the community, that should be considered a cultural practice and not be criminalized as begging.
Yeah.
It was a pretty well thought out petition, I thought, but unfortunately the court turned it down. Similarly, there were some transgender persons who were courageous enough to contest elections. But again, there was a judgment of the Madhya Pradesh High Court saying that a Hijra person cannot contest from a seat reserved for women because they are castrated males. So we had some unfortunate decisions like this until the Supreme Court's decision in the Nalsa case of 2014, where for the first time the court said that every person has the right to determine their own gender identity. And gender identity is not just the binary of male and female, but also a person can identify as third gender, which should now be officially recognized. So Nalsa was again a real milestone in the rights of transgender persons. And then after that, we had the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019, which, despite some, flaws in the law, but because it has been interpreted in light of what the court said in NALSA, we've so far been on a good footing.
Well, thank you, Tripti. That was a very succinct capture of a very long journey, legal journey that India has been through in the past few decades. Now, I'm wondering, so we had NALSA in 2014, but then sodomy and same-sex sexual encounters were still criminalized up till 2018. Can you sort of talk more about the 2018 Supreme Court decision in particular that sort of struck down 377 for the most part, and what impact it might have had both in the legal landscape but also in terms of social lives of queer people in India?
Yeah, sure. So after the NALSA decision, there was another very important decision in India's constitutional jurisprudence, and that is the Puttaswamy judgment, where the court said unanimous decision by 9 judges saying that privacy is a fundamental right and protected by the Constitution. So based on that decision, the community was able to get the Supreme Court to sort of re-look at its order rejecting the NAS judgment of the Delhi High Court. So in 2018, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court in the case of Navtej Johar said that Section 377, so far as it criminalizes consensual adult relationships, is unconstitutional, and the court's decision in 2013 was actually wrong. So it was like, second breath of freedom, but so freedom was restored, but not just restored, but also reinforced in a big way, because now you had 5 judges of the Supreme Court affirming this. So yeah, it was that way very important. And I think immediately after this decision, what we saw happen was that many queer couples had the courage to approach the court and say, our relationship is being frowned upon by our family. There is a threat to our life and security by unaccepting family members, and we want the state's protection. So you had several high courts across the country, I think barring one decision where the Allahabad High Court said that where, two gay men had approached the court asking for protection for their relationship, and the court said, no, this isn't the social union. It's got nothing to do with the law, and it's got nothing to do with the court can't do anything in this. Other than this, several high courts across the country passed orders where, women or men in same-sex relationships, or a transgender person with a cisgender person, if they were in a relationship, were able to get protection orders from the courts. And these orders were very short, barely 1 or 2 pages, and didn't require very elaborate arguments after the Navtej decision. But for those individuals, they meant the world, because you finally could do what you wanted to do with your life, and you didn't need parental approval. On the contrary, even if there was disapproval, you could still, choose to live your life the way you wanted, and the state apparatus would protect you. So you would have orders saying the local police must protect this couple and make sure that there is no danger to their lives and there is no threat. We ourselves were able to secure many such orders for queer couples, and yes, it was very phenomenal. And another, legally, I think one other decision that stands out for me was where somebody was terminated from their job. They were employed in the Commandment of Home Guards. It's like an agency that supports the police in some of its functions for maintaining law and order, communal harmony, etc., etc. So it was it's like a government employment. And this person was terminated because they were gay and they had been filmed in an intimate act. And the Allahabad High Court, like in the case of Professor Sirius, said no, this order is absolutely wrong. One sexual orientation has got nothing to do with their employment. On the contrary, it is a protected facet of one's life. And they reinstated this person in his job. So I think legally these have been really the highlights, I would say. Socially, if you were to ask, then of course, like I said, people were finally free to be themselves, to live their lives the way they want to choose to do the kind of work they want to be with the person they want to. And unlike before, where the state machinery could arrest you if you went to them to make a complaint, now there was no question of arresting you. There was no question of being a silent spectator, but the state machinery was kind of called upon to protect you in the exercise of your rights. Also, spaces opened up, whether it was, freedom of expression through movies, through books, literature, spaces, online, offline, work groups on campus, other spaces. I think it was really like, a wonderful period to be in. Another important development was that many gay and transgender persons were subjected to what is called conversion therapy, all kinds of theory things with no scientific backing, but psychiatrists across the country, or even these so-called babas, were doing all these things, saying we will cure you of your condition. So on the urging of the Madras High Court, the National Medical Commission finally outlawed it and said that conversion therapy would be professional misconduct. So that also is important. The one area where we have unfortunately not seen much progress, I should point that out also, is people's ability to seek protection or to be safe when they interact with others on dating apps or other social media websites. And there have been scores of cases where individuals have gone out hoping to meet somebody who they have interacted with online, but have been subjected to, violence, threats, beating, also sometimes have been filmed without their consent, and then subjected to a whole lot of extortion and blackmail. And unfortunately, the authorities have not been able to do very much. Most individuals still don't find the police station a very queer-friendly space. So making a complaint is often not an option. But I know of cases where people have mustered the courage and managed to make a complaint to the police, and the police have said, if my son were like you, I would shoot him dead.
So Tripti, just links to that. Is that because there is a lack of legal framework to protect queer people from discrimination and violence, or is that because of some sort of lack of sensitization within these government institutions, particularly the police? What's the situation there according to your understanding?
So it's a bit of both, I'd say. So there are provisions in our penal code which criminalize blackmail and extortion, but the success rate is not very much. So if you see the conviction rates, it's less than 30% in these cases. So to get any proper remedy out of these laws. The other thing is that the system itself is not geared up to address complaints of gay, lesbian, transgender persons. And let me give you an example. The Ministry of Home Affairs runs a cyber portal, cyber cell, where you can make complaints if you have been subjected to, any kind of sexual offences, such as your pictures being clicked or videos, etc., being taken without your consent. But according to the website, such a complaint is possible only if the victim is a woman or a child. So the exclusion of queer persons is so obvious. So as a result, the option of making an anonymous complaint from my home without having to go to the police station and the prying eyes of everyone present there is not possible for queer people. And when they go to the police station, they are subjected to statements like, what is this?
Yeah.
And this is not on, and we should be doing better things this time. So yeah, it's a bit important.
So you sort of mentioned a general existence of laws protecting people from blackmail and whatnot, but are there any specific provisions in the law protecting LGBTQ plus people from discrimination and violence? Is there anything specific targeted towards this subgroup of population?
No, we have a specific law, but only for transgender persons.
Okay.
The Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019, which does not apply to lesbian, gay, bisexual persons. And the irony is so obvious that, sometimes when we receive calls from individuals and they say, look, sometimes they will say, ma'am, I'm from the LGBTQ community, and this is what has happened to me. So I say, okay, and you put on to identify as transgender. If you do, I think there are certain remedies. But if you don't, I'm so sorry, the law really doesn't help you. And even for transgender persons, I think there are provisions against discrimination in the Transgender Persons 2019 Act, but that is just on paper. In fact, recently the Supreme Court kind of commented that these provisions should have a remedy. Yeah. There's no point in having a right without a remedy. Yeah. If I can't exercise that right, one wouldn't hesitate to have it on paper. So yeah, as far as anti-discrimination is concerned, we are way behind. To maybe just elaborate a little more. So if the discrimination happens to be in the public sphere, which is against the government, or a government-operated company or a government body, then you can approach the court. You can file a petition in the High Court or sometimes straight away in the Supreme Court. Also, if the agency is a private body, but it's performing public functions such as a hospital, because offering treatment or medical care is the government's function. But a private agency is doing it, so you can even take that private hospital to court by filing a writ petition. But if it is purely, like a private company, stock trading company, or, any other financial company, etc., or any other, like, garment, export, design, whatever, and unfortunately, there's nothing we can do if you are discriminated against. So, that's a gap in our law.
So, Tripti, moving on for sort of these negative rights, in a sense of like protection from violence, to more affirmative rights to having a partnership, right, recognized by the state. And we know that India had a major hearing in the Supreme Court on marriage equality last year. I'm sort of wondering what the current legal status of marriage equality is in India. Are any queer people allowed to form any sort of union that's registered by the state in India, or what's the situation there?
So, as far as marriage is concerned, just as background information, it's important to know that marriage is regulated by two sets of laws in our country. One is what is called personal law, which applies to persons who are marrying on the basis of their religion. So, for the Hindus, it's separate law; for Christians, it's separate; for Muslims, separate. For Parsis, it's separate. And then there is what is called secular law, which allows people of two different faiths to marry, or also people who do not want to use the religious personal law framework, but want to marry under the secular legal framework. So the Special Marriage Act is one such law. Now, the marriage equality case before the Supreme Court was premised on a challenge to the secular law, the Special Marriage Act and the Foreign Marriage Act, where one person was a foreign national. The court, there are two aspects to this decision. One is that the court said that same-sex marriage, so two people of the same sex or same gender do not have the right to marry, and they refuse to hold that the Special Marriage Act, to the extent that it's restricted to heterosexual marriage, is unconstitutional. And the court said that this is something only the parliament can legislate on. It is not for the court to adjudicate all this. But as far as marriage involving transgender persons is concerned, if it is what the court said, heterosexual marriage, in the sense that a trans woman wanting to marry either a cis man or a trans man, and vice versa, a trans man wanting to marry either a trans woman or a cisgender woman, that is fine. That they can marry both under the personal laws, whatever religion that the parties belong to, or the secular law. So there was a minority decision, as in this judgment was, as you know, by 5 judges of the Supreme Court. So there was a 3:2 division on the question of civil union.
Yeah.
So the minority opinion by 2 judges said that though we don't recognize the right to marry, but there is a fundamental right to form partnerships of where it's like, a steady, stable partnership, like in the nature of a civil union. The state ought to recognize this. But the majority decision said that no, this is again something that the court cannot get into. But the sort of the silver lining of this decision was that the court said that the government should set up a committee, a high-powered committee, to examine various aspects of discrimination, including in the sphere of marriage and personal relationships that LGBTQ persons experience, and come up with certain suggestions and remedies. And this committee, I think, has been set up. I think that just before the elections it was constituted. I'm not aware of any meetings that they have had or any deliberations that may have occurred. But yes, this is a space to sort of watch out for.
And how about sort of other rights related to family, such as rights to adoption, rights to parenting for LGBTQ plus people? Are there any provisions that sort of have made progress in that regard?
So, adoption is governed by the Juvenile Justice Act, and regulations notified under the Juvenile Justice Act by this agency called CARA, or the Central Adoption Resource Authority. Now, it's both the law and the regulations make it very clear that non-married couples, like live-in couples or other couples and other kinds of relationships, cannot adopt. Only married couples can adopt, or single persons can adopt. So, with the caveat that a man adopting, oneself cannot adopt a girl child.
Okay.
So, what this means is that where couples cannot adopt, for sure, A, because they cannot marry, they cannot adopt, and B, non-marital couples cannot adopt. If you're gay, you could adopt as a single individual, but then the government came up with this notification saying that we have come to know that in the application that the person submits for being an adoptive parent, they mention that they are single, but when we go for the home visit or home study assessment, we find that they're living with someone. So they're in a live-in relationship. So in such cases, no adoption will be allowed. So then the framework is quite restrictive as it stands, and unfortunately challenge to these provisions also was turned down by the court in the marriage court.
So, Tripti, so far we've talked quite a bit about all kinds of legal changes that have come about or not come about also. I'm sort of wondering, especially as a social scientist, I'm quite curious between how legal change relates to social change, right? So in your sort of understanding, what is that relationship like, especially sometimes when certain legal ideas may not have traction at the level of society, right? When it comes to, for instance, same-sex marriage, one of the podcast episodes of this very Baat Karoge to Baat Banegi season was discussing about sort of people not even understanding the idea of two men or two women being together and raising a family and such. So in that context, what does it even sort of mean to have a law, let's say, allowing for same-sex relationships, same-sex marriages? How do you think through that sort of thornier dynamics of change?
Oh, I think it's an interesting question, but not a straightforward one. Because I don't think I will have any able to give you any neat answers. But I remember many years ago when we were working on the first case, the Nas Foundation case in the Delhi High Court. We were asked often that, do you think even if the law were to change, will Indian society ever change? Will it ever accept same-sex relationships? So I remember our answer at that time was quite clear, and we said, look, we're lawyers. We will work towards legal change, and society can decide what it wants to do. You know, that's not our remit.
Fair enough.
Our remit is to change the law. And it did change. And because the law changed, I think society at some level was forced to change, because there were many parents who said that, okay, now this is the courts, the highest court of the country has accepted this as a very natural expression of human sexuality. And the court has said that they have same rights, equal rights, cannot be discriminated against. So why am I holding a prejudice against my own child? So many, families, parents who were otherwise not accepting or were conservative were after being confronted with the decisions, had to accept. Similarly, with a lot of transgender persons, I remember clients calling and saying that, I was sitting and watching the news or television when the NASA judgment came, and I was crying, and my mother just came and she said, "Isn't the court is accepted?" So I know I finally now who am I to kind of come in the way of you realizing your dreams and aspirations? So and through these cases, for instance, the protection orders that I was talking about, the court was not saying that this relationship it was not asking the question or giving an answer as to the legitimacy of this relationship. Is it recognized by law? Is it recognized by society? All it said is that individuals have the right. They have the autonomy, the dignity, the capacity, the liberty to decide what they want to do with their lives, including in the sphere of romantic and intimate partnerships. And we don't see sexual orientation or gender identity as being the barrier in this. So when you get an order from the court saying the police will protect this couple, and the family is like, okay, take that off. Then they are still family standing around on that basis. So I think social change is, of course, slow, but you have to make a start. And I feel legal reforms, legal changes, and especially in this area, in this age where information spreads fast with social media, internet, etc., I think change is occurring. And so, we're quite optimistic.
So, Tripti, to wrap this conversation up, which has been very illuminating to me personally, what would be one issue in which India should be making movement in the LGBTQ plus rights landscape in the next few years or in the next decade or so?
I would say two things. I think one, legally, the need for an anti-discrimination law, which has proper measures for enforcement and accessing remedy. Not like the Transgender Persons Act. We need something proper, and there are enough examples from other parts of the world which we can look at. The second, I would say, and this can be something which can be done fairly quickly, is for a particular department or ministry in the government anchoring LGBTQ rights. You know, for transgender persons, they were nothing. They were literally like, we were the lowest on the social route. But after the decision was made, then one particular ministry, which is the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, will kind of house this particular community, and we will look after them as it looks after so many other marginalized communities. Things have started to change. So if there are any grievances, members of the community can knock on the doors of the government and say, this is the problem, you need to do something. Or this is what the law said, this is what the court has said. Now it's your time to come up with an implementation framework. Unfortunately, we've had this sort of give it the stepmotherly treatment to lesbian, gay, and bisexual persons or other queer persons. They don't, then that ministry doesn't want to own them. Yeah. No other ministry wants to own them. Whether it's the women's ministry or the health ministry, they just don't want to. So then you're nobody's child. Yeah. And you don't know where to go. The police don't welcome them. The health authorities don't welcome them. So I think just making sure that there is some agency within the government where they can go to would give us a starting point.
Thank you so much, Tripti, for this very enlightening conversation. It was an honor to chat with you today. Thank you to our listeners and viewers for coming to this episode of Baat Karoge to Baat Banegi. Thank you, everyone.